No, you are going to settle the $3,000 bill that your daughter walked out on at my steakhouse. The man at the door claimed to be running the top steakhouse in our area on behalf of Bush League Baseball. He said my daughter had taken off and dashed without paying, but that was just not feasible. I would be caught in a human vice between life, what half made, and will. But these gin-soaked wolves should not get me down. After all, my daughter is. My name is Layla. I'm 30 years old. I live with my husband Daniel and our daughter Enna. I was once deceived by a former boyfriend who conned me out of $3,000. I found out that I was pregnant with his child. I tried reaching out to him several times, but he never responded. He simply vanished. I was left alone, divorced, with barely any savings left. Still, I gave birth to Emma. I was steeling myself for the tough times ahead when the news came that my ex-boyfriend was arrested. The man who came to my house for the inquiry was Daniel, my now husband. Daniel supported me as I was worn out from dealing with the ordeal with my ex-boyfriend. Despite our age difference, I was attracted to Daniel, who was strong and reliable. I was divorced and thought I would never be accepted. However, Daniel did accept me. Now we have a good relationship with Daniel's parents and are leading a happy life. Then one day I received a phone call from Daniel's parents. It's been a while and we were hoping you'd visit. We would love to see our grandchild. The voice of my mother-in-law, filled with affection, came from the other side of the phone. My in-laws love their son's daughter, who is not related to them by blood, and I'm very happy about it. Absolutely. I'll let Daniel know as well, I said. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law cheerfully said, "Thank you," and ended the call. It takes about 5 hours to reach my in-laws' house from the city. It's a place in the countryside where time seems to pass slowly. I immediately told my husband about the message from his parents when he returned home in the evening. "Well, I haven't taken any vacation yet this month. Let's use some time off and visit them. I'll check with my boss if we can get consecutive days off." With that, Daniel quickly called his boss for approval. His boss kindly gave us approval, and we started looking forward to visiting his parents after a long time. However, on the day of the visit, Daniel suddenly had to work. "You go ahead. I'll head there right after I finish work. I might not arrive until the next morning, though," Daniel said. With these words, Daniel sent us off and headed to his office. I let my in-laws know about the change in plans and then set off with my daughter. When we arrived at the in-laws' house, they treated us warmly, and we spent a comfortable time there. They seemed eager for Daniel to arrive soon. The next day, early in the morning, my in-laws headed to the barn as usual. I offered to help, but they insisted that I take it easy during my visit. So I waited for them to return home. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was too early for Daniel to arrive. Assuming it was a neighbor, I hurriedly went outside. "I'm coming," I called out as I opened the door. I found a man in his 70s standing there. He glared at me with a fierce expression and then suddenly said, "I'm the owner of a local steakhouse. Your daughter dined and dashed at my place. Pay me $3,000. I was taken aback by his words and blinked in surprise. He then proceeded to explain the situation. Apparently, a young girl came to his store the previous night. Despite warning her that his store was too upscale for her to afford, she forced her way in and consumed $3,000 worth of food and drinks. Afterward, she quickly left without paying. I found out that she's your daughter. If you're a parent, you should pay for her," he demanded. I shook my head, trying to defend myself, but he seemed too angry to listen and kept insisting that I should pay him. "Excuse me, may I ask your name?" I inquired. "I told you it's Ethan. Now hurry up and pay," he retorted. "I need to ask my parents-in-law whether they know you." "Huh, shouldn't you be more worried about paying me first?" "Well, yes, but could you please wait a second?" I asked him to wait and immediately contacted my in-laws. I called them right away to confirm my suspicion. They responded quickly and told me an astonishing fact. Trying not to show my surprise, I looked at the man standing before me. "I can't pay you," I said. "What are you saying? You don't care if my business suffers. If you don't pay, I'll call the police." But wait, I think there's some misunderstanding. There can't be a misunderstanding. I made sure to ask for her name when she dined, Ethan said, bringing out his cell phone to call the police. A policeman happened to pass by. The steakhouse owner called over the police officer and explained the situation. The officer furrowed his brows and glared at me. "May I have a word with you?" he asked. I was confused, not knowing what to do under the officer's intimidating gaze. "Your daughter is suspected of dining and dashing. If things stay as they are, we'll have to arrest her," he stated, demanding I hand over my daughter right away. "No, there's been a misunderstanding. My daughter wouldn't do something like that." Even though I said this, the officer was unyielding. The steakhouse owner then said, "If you insist on offering a concession, I'm not a monster. Since we're neighbors, if you can pay, I'll forgive her." "Ethan, are you sure about this?" "Oh, it doesn't bother me. She's a young girl. I knew she wouldn't be able to pay from the beginning, but she still wanted to eat my food. Isn't that an honor?" The steakhouse owner laughed heartily at this. The police officer's expression softened, and he presented me with a choice. "Ethan here is offering you a solution. Why don't you pay the $3,000 for the food and drink bill? He hasn't filed the complaint yet, so you won't be charged with a crime." I refused nonetheless. As I opened my mouth to explain my reasons, the steakhouse owner's face flushed with anger, and he yelled, "You're spurning my generosity. Is this how you raised your daughter? Don't mess with me." "Calm down, please. Why are you refusing to pay? If things stay as they are, your daughter will truly be arrested," the police officer asked me with a bewildered expression. "I can't just agree to this," I said. As I was saying this, the steakhouse owner let out a laugh. Sorry. You mean you don't have $3,000 on you right now?" I forgot. As we age, we become forgetful. "While our shop accepts credit card payments, if you trust your credit card to me, I can handle the payment and return it later. Is that good?" Saying this, he instructed me to get my wallet. I refused, saying it was too risky to entrust my credit card to someone else, and offered to go along with him to handle the payment. However, the steakhouse owner threatened me, raising his fist and yelling, "Don't you trust me? I'm in the credit business. Be careful with what you say, or you'll regret it." "Why can't I accompany you?" I asked. The steakhouse owner started yelling again. "Because you're disrespecting me. Listen, I'm connected with famous organizations around here. If you can't pay the money, I can still make you pay $3,000 using my methods. That's why I've even called a police officer to handle this legally." As he ranted on, I stared at the steakhouse owner in disbelief. I wondered if it was okay for him to say such things in front of a police officer. Glancing over, I saw the officer pretending not to hear and looking away. "Excuse me, you are a police officer, right? Did you hear that? This is a threat, isn't it? Is this okay?" When I sought help, the police officer lowered his head with a troubled expression. "No, I didn't hear anything. Anyway, if you pay the money, everything will be settled. Leela, please do as you're told." What did this man just say? I could not believe a police officer would say that. Dumbfounded, I watched as the steakhouse owner began to threaten me once again with his harsh words. Any ordinary person would despair at the words of these two. They'd likely choose to pay the money and settle things, but I couldn't allow it. Aren't police officers supposed to protect the safety of citizens? Why are you siding with the bad guys? Despite my desperate appeal, the police officer only looked away without uttering a single word. The police are saying the same thing. What are you going to do? Make up your mind. Are you still not going to pay just because I'm old? Don't take me lightly. The steakhouse owner glared at me as he said this. It's not because I'm taking him lightly that I'm behaving this way. It's just unbelievable. So I'm stubbornly refusing. Even if I try to explain, these two wouldn't let me get a word in. As I was thinking about what to do, a taxi pulled up in front of my house. My husband got out. What happened? Who are these two people? My husband, looking confused, asked, "Is this your husband? You need to take responsibility." "Let me explain it to you, sir." After listening to the police officer, my husband Daniel looked at me with a surprised face. When I frowned in confusion, Daniel seemed to understand everything and gave me a mischievous smile. I've always loved this playful side of him. "Sorry to have caused you trouble. My apologies. By the way, young man, which department do you belong to? Do you have a police badge?" Caught off guard by my husband's sudden outburst, the police officer stepped back a bit, but quickly took out his police badge from his pocket. "This is fake," Daniel said. "Wait, what are you?" The police officer started to sweat. Daniel laughed and said, "Just kidding." Hearing my husband's words, the police officer nervously forced a smile. Next, my husband asked him about his department and rank. "Do you really need that information right now?" "Just curious. Can't you tell me?" "Oh, well, I'm a constable on duty at the police box." "Oh, I've never seen you before. Are you new to the area?" "Thanks for your service. Yes, I'm still new. So would you mind if I contacted your station? Is it okay to use the name written on your badge earlier, Grant Martin?" As my husband asked this while taking out his phone, the police officer quickly grabbed his hand. "Before that, about the issue with Ethan, I would appreciate it if you could tell me whether you can pay or not." The police officer urged my husband for an answer. The steakhouse owner, Ethan, seemed to have been completely overwhelmed by my husband's pace, and his fierceness from earlier had disappeared. "You take responsibility. You're the husband, right?" "Yes, but I don't have a job that earns that kind of money." "That doesn't mean you can dodge your bills." Unfazed by Ethan, Daniel just shrugged it off and said, "Oh well. One last thing, can you tell me your gun's serial number?" "What? Why? It's not something I can easily tell you." "Ha, that can't be. Knowing the number doesn't mean anything. Or did you forget? This is a widely accepted verification method." As my husband Daniel said this with a serious face, the police officer tilted his head and asked, "Really?" Watching my husband's response and the behavior of the two, my suspicion turned into conviction. Without a doubt, these two were in cahoots. "By the way, would you mind hearing my opinion on this dine and dash incident?" my husband said, giving the two a stern look. They looked puzzled by my husband's sudden, strange suggestion. "In conclusion, you are a fake cop who's trying to scam us with that old man over there, aren't you?" The two were taken aback by my husband's words. "Do you have any evidence?" "Yeah, show me the evidence that I'm lying." At their words, my husband said to me, "Layla, bring her over." I ran to the back and brought our precious child in front of the two to prevent any harm to her. My husband Daniel stepped in between us. "My daughter is 1 year old, so she can't even walk, let alone dine and dash," I said. The two were shocked and opened their mouths wide. "No, that's a lie. Is that child really yours?" "Of course. After all, I'm only 30 years old. If this child wasn't my first, at what age would I have had my first child?" When I said that, Ethan, the steakhouse owner, clearly became unsettled and took a step back. Then he glanced at the police officer, who nodded in response to his gaze. "Oh, it seems that the dine and dasher was someone else. My apologies." The police officer and the steakhouse owner were about to run off when Daniel stepped in, encircling them so they couldn't escape. I immediately retreated to the entrance and watched the two through a gap in the door. "Could you perhaps let me through?" "No, we won't let you escape. You might be scammers. We won't allow it." "Don't mess with me. I'm a police officer. If you don't let me through, I'll arrest you for obstructing an investigation." The officer tried to forcefully shove Daniel aside, but Daniel nimbly circled back in front of him. "My apologies for not introducing myself earlier. I'm Daniel Taylor, Chief Inspector of the New York Investigation Division." With that, Daniel pulled out his police badge from his pocket. It was a genuine police badge shining there, not some cheap imitation like the one the young officer had shown earlier. "Liar, I'm the real deal. Whether you're real or not doesn't matter. You've committed fraud, haven't you? It's a disgrace for a police officer. Do you understand what the investigation division does?" "What are you talking about?" "You don't know what the investigation division is? The division is responsible for investigating intelligent crimes such as fraud, embezzlement, counterfeit money, election violations, financial crimes, defamation, and high-tech crimes. In other words, it deals with criminals like you." Saying this, Daniel quickly took out handcuffs and began to arrest the two. They couldn't resist the professionalism and were quickly apprehended. Daniel then immediately took out his phone and said, "I've apprehended fraudsters on the spot. This is outside my jurisdiction. Please send officers from the designated area over here immediately." Upon hearing Daniel's words, the faces of the two scammers quickly turned pale. "But please forgive us. We were just desperate for money. It's our first offense. Please let us go." Just then, my in-laws arrived with the police. "Are you okay?" "Sorry we're late. This guy couldn't explain things properly." "Whatever. Wait, you're here too?" "What a relief," my in-laws said, pulling me and our daughter into a hug. I had been on edge this whole time but could finally relax and breathe a sigh of relief. The two were loaded into a police car. At first, I thought that the old man was the only fraudster. When I called my in-laws, I asked if a man named Ethan lived in the neighborhood. My in-laws didn't know the name. They've lived here a long time and know everyone who lives around here. If they didn't know him, that meant Ethan did not exist here. More importantly, my daughter is the only one. She couldn't possibly have dined and dashed. Although I hadn't directly asked my in-laws to call the police, they had understood my situation and told me they would bring the police. I thought I had to keep this man here until then. I was quite tense, but I made up my mind to protect my daughter. I sensed something fishy about the police officer who showed up. After talking to him for a while, I couldn't stand him or forgive him. Although I didn't have any proof at first, I became sure he was a fake officer due to Daniel's questioning. It was fortunate that Daniel was there this time, but thinking about what could have happened if he hadn't been made me break out in a cold sweat. I'm really glad it was resolved safely. After that, thanks to Daniel and the officer in charge of the area, the case involving the two fraudsters was closed. When they were investigated, it seemed a lot of charges were lined up one after another. Daniel sighed and told me the story. He looked somewhat sad and angry at the same time. Also, it seems that these two fraudsters were not part of an organization. Their faces became known to the entire country thanks to the news. As for me, thanks to the consideration of Daniel and my in-laws, I was able to stay at their home one more day. The news that Daniel had arrested the fraudsters quickly spread, and all the neighbors brought over a bunch of fancy food. The gathering quickly turned into a party. Our daughter also seemed to be having fun and didn't cry at all. That night I was savoring my happiness as I looked over